Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and before I get on to today's episode with Jonathan Small, titled The Hidden Benefits of Buying an Existing Podiatry Practice, and there are many, just a reminder everybody, if you want to know more about marketing, you want to learn more about marketing your podiatry practice, and I don't mean you just want to learn a little bit more, you seriously want to learn more about marketing, please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, click on events and see when my next podiatry marketing masterclass is coming up. I've held them in the UK, I hold them in Australia. So go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, click on events and see when the next one is. Okay, now let's get on to this episode. Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends Podcast. Podcast designed to help you feel, see and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is a name that most people, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll know this name. It is Jonathan Small. We've been friends now for a few years. I've lost count of how many times he's been on the podcast, but every time he's on here, the feedback I get from everyone is really good. So hopefully this episode will not be any exception to the rule. So Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me back again, Tyson. Always good to chat on here. I'm always amazed by how quickly you can say, see, think and feel about the profession. And you say it all in one word nowadays rather than the whole sentence.
Yeah, and it's funny, some of the AI programs, when I put it into Descript and it'll give me the transcript, and sometimes it actually comes up, feel so think, and it's got the weirdest word that it'll actually come up with there. And I have to go, no, I said, this is what I actually said. So, yes, I do need to slow down a little bit when I talk sometimes, especially for our listeners in the Netherlands and in Iceland and in Denmark who have said that they really enjoy the show. But sometimes they said some of my guests are hard to understand. They've gotten used to me.
It all depends on the accent as well, doesn't it? As well as the speed.
It'd be those Scottish ones. So anyway, Jonathan, the reason I got you back on here today was at the Foot and Ankle Show when you got dressed up as a white rabbit and came bouncing. Well, actually, you didn't bounce. You came running into the area where the stage was, stage one, which was the main stage. You came bouncing in as a white rabbit and you were going through your talk. But one of the key concepts of your talk, I felt, got missed towards the end a little bit. And I thought it was so important that we need to make it its own episode.
Yeah, I was overrunning a little bit, so I had to speed up, didn't I? And so that important point to get very briefly run over, basically. Not the rabbit getting run over, but the point.
So what was the main point that you were trying to get across in that particular talk was?
So I had several points in the whole talk around the fact that podiatry has evolved from what it was, and there's a lot of people who are still stuck with where it was and still working within those restrictions, those blocks, those old-fashioned approaches to it, really, as opposed to realising what podiatry is and can be for the future and what their possibilities are for themselves around their businesses. But so I was just sharing information that I gleaned over 30 years in private practice and where I saw it was heading, and using patient testimonials to support what I'd learned, really, rather than just it being my opinion. I was actually getting feedback from patients as to what was the most relevant things that they saw with regard to any engagement they had with podiatrists.
I think the biggest thing too with your talk was just the positive aspect of what you were actually trying to push across. And I totally understand. You and I have been in the profession for a while. I graduated in 88. So I'm sure there's people that listen to this podcast that weren't even born then. They've come after that. And I do. And I've seen the profession just change so much, where it used to be most towns had only a couple of podiatrists there. And they were very protective of their area. And if you just encroach, it was almost like a gang war sometimes. Well, hang on, That's my corner. And it got not angry, but just not friendly.
No, I understand. Absolutely.
I recall back in the early 90s, I went and had a visit, spoke to a GP, just let him know my practice was here. This is what I'm doing. And I actually got a letter from a podiatrist in the area who said to me, I heard that you went and visited this doctor. Yeah, that's my doctor, and he sends his patients to me.
Oh, really?
Wow. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, not anymore.
Yeah.
Because when I visited the doctor, I recall this doctor actually saying to me, I've never met a podiatrist before.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind away, that he said, oh, I know there's podiatrists around, but they open up a clinic, they put the sign up, and they sit there waiting for everybody just to send them patients. And that's how it used
Yeah.
to be, but it's not that way anymore.
No, that's right. And a few years ago, I did a promotion saying that not all podiatrists are created equal, because we're not all equal. We've all got
No.
different skill sets and different things. And I got absolutely slated by colleagues for suggesting that we weren't the same. And I just found it really negative, that feedback, instead of embracing and going, yeah, we're all different. So let's focus on our differences. One of the things that's led to this episode of the podcast was this different opinion between you and I about actually starting your own business from scratch, or actually taking over an existing practice.
Yeah.
That's the one of the messages that did get speeded to at the end of my talk, and I know you were quite keen to explore that today.
Yeah, well, that was one of the main things I wanted to talk about, because up until probably talking to you or listening to your talk, and we'd spoken about before you got up on stage, so I knew what you were going to talk about. Didn't know about the white rabbit costume. That took me by surprise. Didn't even see it hidden in the car when we drove up. You think I'd notice some big white ears sitting out the back seat, but no, didn't notice that. But when you did your talk and then when we spoke afterwards, it actually changed my thinking a little bit. Because prior to the talk, I always thought, why buy somebody else's practice and all their headaches and all the garbage that goes along with it, when what they're asking for, you could take that money and start a business from scratch and build it the way that you want to build it. But having spoken to you about taking over an existing practice and then building upon it and making the changes you want to make, and knowing that there's already cash flow there right from day dot, one could make it easy to get a loan. But instead of practices just closing and then having to restart, close, restart. And I think that was the point you were trying to get across.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the fact, how can we ever build bigger and better practices that serve the population better if we're always, as you say, closing, restarting, you're never going to grow a business that's going to be multi-generational, going on for decades or even centuries, that can serve the population and build on its past experiences, which of course is what every other business around the world does that's really successful. They look at buying existing businesses to grow, or if they have started from scratch, they've realized it's taken a long time to get to where they want to get to, and then they change their business model and go, actually, I'm much quicker in acquiring other businesses rather than doing that from scratch. And of course, the other problem from scratch is that we're not trained to be business people. Tyson. In our training, we are not trained to be business people. So you're starting in business with no training, no skills, no knowledge, with your own beliefs and biases and experiences, many of which may be negative, that they can then impact on you for you starting the business. And then you're learning on the job. So you're constantly making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And you waste so much time, energy, effort, money in those early startup years. And don't get me wrong, I know what that feels like. I've been there, I've done that, as have you. Yeah. And I tell you, if somebody could have handed me a business that was ready built, that was a successful business early on, and all I had to do was actually make sure I could service the debt associated with buying that business, I would have taken that time and time again, because it just means that I saved all that wasted energy trying to start getting momentum going with the business.
I think it also depends where you are in your career. Well, before we get to that part, I think it's interesting how sometimes all it takes is a little bit of new information to make you change your thinking or your beliefs. And that's why I liked it when you had a different opinion to me. But then when I heard your opinion on this particular area of podiatry, I went, oh, okay, I've been presented with new information. I took that in, and it actually changed how I looked at things and what I believed. I hate it when I see podiatrists, I've got this opinion. You present new information to them and go, here is the new information. And they put these blinkers on and they refuse to change their beliefs or even consider that they could actually not be wrong, but there is another way of looking at it. So Absolutely. What you were talking about then too, I think it also comes back to where you are in your career. So me now, if I was going to set up a practice, Would I or would I not buy somebody else's practice? It would depend on the practice. And it would take me looking at numbers, but it's only because I've had so many businesses in the past. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Or if I was going to do something from scratch, I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't even think about it. It's almost automatic. But go back 30 years, I was dumb as. Had no idea. I made so many mistakes. I'm thinking, if there had been an existing business there that I could have gone there, maybe worked at for a little while, knowing the intention was they wanted to sell in 12 months, 2 years, without being stupid about it and say, no, I want you to build my practice up for 2 years so then I can charge you more. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I can't see any problem with it at all. I ran some modeling a few years ago on the money transaction side of things, of what happens if you buy a business as opposed to starting from scratch. And every way that I modeled this, it always proved financially better to not start from scratch. Every single way. And I couldn't make it work, but that it was always going to be, in any way, it could be better to actually start from scratch from a financial perspective. And from then, once I did that modeling, I was convinced that actually buying existing business makes absolute sense. And it's really good timing for this episode, because we've just had a new report from our College of Podiatry come out in the UK, and it's the state of independent practice. And there's some really fascinating information come out of this. Basically, they've surveyed over 1,200 podiatrists that have answered the questionnaire. Basically, they've analysed the results of the information they've collected, and a lot of it is relevant to what we're talking about this evening. So, if it's okay with you, I'd like to share some of that information around what we're talking about now, because it absolutely makes sense. The cohort is from newly qualified practitioners to those with 59 years experience. So we're looking at that. You said, where do you stand in your career, sort of thing. Yeah. So that's a range. But the most common length of practice is 24 years. That's the average within the data. But the key challenges identified by the people who answered were handling variable patient volumes, cash flow, overhead costs, as well as setting competitive prices. So when you're starting from scratch, you have to address those key challenges. You've got no way of knowing how to address those key challenges. You can only go on and talking to others about how they've done it, but it isn't necessarily right for the business model that you're trying to develop. Whereas if it's an existing business, they'll already have systems in place to help with these things. You may then see improvements to those systems to help them get over those challenges better. But generally, they'll have already worked out the solutions. You're not going to have to waste time, energy, and money trying to work out those solutions. The other bit of information that came in around the starting from having no real business knowledge is, it said many practitioners find their undergraduate training focused on NHS careers, leaving them unprepared for the business aspects of private practice. Respondents expressed challenges in balancing business skills with patient care and regretted not pursuing management training earlier. So they want this information. To bridge this gap, independent podiatrists seek resources to enhance their business acumen, valuing business coaching, like from yourself, Tyson, for insights into marketing and management. So if you're doing it from scratch, it's a fact of don't do it by yourself from scratch. It's actually engage with somebody who's already been through the process. So a mentor or a coach like yourself, in order to support them. And that's what you can get if you buy into an existing practice. You get that support from somebody who's already done it, and you get the cash flow that goes with it as well. Yeah, so that's where you're getting that bonus. It goes on to say there's a clear need for ongoing comprehensive business guidance instead of isolated courses. Current training models do not adequately prepare podiatrists for the demands of private practice management. The unique model of independent private care is evident from the results of this project, but there is a need for additional training beyond that of core competencies in podiatry. This data supports the development of business-focused training and frameworks to build and support those in independent practice. So absolutely, podiatrists are crying out for support from a business perspective. So why lose years trying to do that instead of actually buying existing business where a lot of those problems have already been solved? And I found it really interesting because you said at the beginning you weren't interested in buying into practice because of the problems that you've been faced.
I think also too, and this is the part that It's important to point out, when I think back to my earlier days and looking at people's practices, they weren't good, but they were run by the seat of the pants. The person who ran the business they had no idea how to run a business. They put a sign up, people came in, some they charged this, others they charged different prices. They were discounting, they had pensioner discounts everywhere.
No systems.
Zero systems. And this is something I've always said to people when I'm doing business coaching. A business with systems will sell more than a business that doesn't have systems. So I would look at some of these existing businesses. And I remember even when I set up some of my early businesses, when I still had not much idea what I was doing, making mistakes. And I was looking at buying other businesses to expand. And I just wouldn't touch them. I thought, I might as well just go and open up another one based on what I've already learnt and mistakes I've made. I won't make them the second time.
Yeah.
So I think some people, they do have businesses that they're trying to sell, may not be run very well, but there's a lot out there that these days, I think people have learned that you've got to put these systems in place. So I think there's businesses today that are much better than they were years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you there that there are better businesses to buy into than others, but then that way is often reflected in the price point as well. Yeah. So if you want a low entry cost, then you're going to end up with the business that's not quite as good as if you do a high entry cost. So you'll have to put more effort into to improve that business, but it's still better than starting from a 0 point. Because a 0 point means there's no income coming in through the door. Yeah.
I've seen people open up businesses with the best intentions, but they don't have the cash flow to do it. They would have been better to stay working for someone for another 12 or 18 months, saved up a bit more money.
Yeah.
Then when they're going to do their own thing, because you need cash flow is king. And if the cash gets tight, your brain switches off and you start making stupid decisions because you're making the decision based on money, not on what is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and talking of money, it was really fascinating in this report that actually they put down 129 were earning below £20,000. So what's that, $37,000 Australian dollars, something like that? Yeah,
crap. That's just crap money.
Crazy for you running your own business. It's ridiculous. And so that about 10% of respondents were earning less than £20,000. That shows that actually, if they'd have just gone and bought another practice, they'd have earned more than £20,000 straight away. Yeah. And they'd be in a better place financially from it.
It'd be better to be working for somebody else too. And I think that's part of why they say, there's a shortage of podiatrists. I don't think there's a shortage of podiatrists. I think there's too many really poorly run businesses by people who've got no idea what they're doing, earning $37,000 a year running their own practice badly, whereas they could be earning double if they went and worked for somebody else who is screaming to find a podiatrist. And then when they work for that person, they go, this is how a business is run. Oh, you're thinking of selling down the track. Now I'm going to work with you for a few years and then I want to buy your practice. How would that sound? And I think that's how the profession's going to get stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I covered this in the talk, didn't I? Where actually you're better off going.
You covered it quickly, Jonathan. You covered it very quickly in your talk. You had 2 talks. Next time, put your hand up and say, "Can I have an hour?"
I did try. It's the fact that they think that actually to get more money for themselves, they'll go and start a business from scratch. So often on the back of some other employment, we've seen it in the forum this week. Somebody who said to working with the NHS wants to start doing some home visits in a nursing home or whatever. They're not going to transform their life financially doing that. And they're going to be back-breaking work to do it. They're going to get a job in a decent private practice. Then they're going to earn a decent living. They're going to learn a lot about business and private practice. And then they can either look to buying into that private practice or then going and buying somebody else's, having all their skill set they've developed. Or if they've managed to save some money, then maybe they can start from scratch then. But again, they'll have that slow momentum for themselves. It's just crazy, this just starting those little practices from scratch. Yes, 30 years ago, it's what we did, but it's not what we do in 2025. It's not what we need to do. It's certainly not doing the profession any favours, nor the public any favours, because we constantly starting from the bottom and working up, so we can never get really good because we're not building on past experience and knowledge.
Yeah, I came across an old video on my YouTube channel, Tyson E. Franklin, if anyone wants to go and check it out. But there was a video I came across and it was about the evolution of podiatry. And I said, part of the problem, I think, with podiatry, one is what you're talking about, but also when people start their practices, they don't evolve as a podiatrist and they don't let their business evolve. They keep hanging on to the past and not wanting to let it go and not leaving stuff for the newer people coming through. So be an example, you're setting up your business. You might be doing a few nursing homes in the area. You might be doing some home visits, might be doing a bit of government work. And then you get your private patients that come in. But as your private patients get busier, I believe you should be letting go of the nursing homes, letting go of the home visits, letting go of the government work, and let the next podiatrist coming through take that work. Don't try and hold onto it all yourself.
Or even better, employ the podiatrist within your business with a view to mentoring them into the better stuff, the MSK stuff, the surgeries or whatever, and then doing the support work around the nursing home or whatever. Yeah.
It sounds similar where people go in the NHS because they've been told that's where they should work for a couple of years by lecturers at certain universities. This is just what I've been told recently. And because private practice is evil. But instead of then transitioning, instead of working at NHS and dabbling in private practice, why not just give your job up? Because there's people screaming for podiatrists, go and work privately for someone, let that job position open up for the new graduate coming through so they can get their couple of years of experience before they then transition on. And it's then when they transition on, the option, you can set up your own business or you can look at working somewhere and then potentially maybe buying somebody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does make sense to make sure we've got some career flow in our profession rather than getting stuck in a pigeonhole and not actually growing ourselves. I think that's really important to our own personal development, is to make sure that we do keep growing and keep moving, don't get stuck in those comfort zones. The report also gave this information for us to give them some data to what we're talking about. That 73% started their businesses from scratch. Only 16% bought an existing business, 2% inherited the business, and 1% bought a franchise. Yeah. So that's 73% of all those respondents. So that's what, 800, 900 businesses for those respondents starting from scratch. Yeah. And it's no wonder that 10% of them are earning less than £20,000 a year. Interestingly, to also tie in with a previous episode where we talked about buying your own premises, you've covered that in an episode, was that actually only 18% own their own premises outright, 50% renting. Yeah, and the remaining not having premises to run. And I did try, I've asked them, the people who had collated the information, did they find a correlation between those starting from scratch and those who ended up owning their own business? And they said they haven't got the data, unfortunately. But I would postulate that maybe those who actually bought an existing business ended up owning the premises sooner than somebody who started from scratch. That's my postulation. I haven't got the evidence there. But it makes sense that if you're already in a practice where you've got good cash flow, then you're then more able to buy into the premises itself.
Yeah, it makes sense. So but yourself, you set your business up from scratch?
Yeah.
You own your own building? Yeah, and you own your own building?
Yeah.
I set mine up from scratch. I owned my own building. So it'd be an interesting stat, though, because I think this 16%, going back 20 years ago, I don't think as many people were buying other people's businesses. But I think in the future, as people are buying businesses, because I probably have a phone call with someone every 2 weeks, and it's somebody who's either thinking about setting up their own business, somebody who's thinking about buying somebody else's business, and some of the ones that have asked about buying somebody else's business, they went, oh, and by the way, the building's for sale as well after so many years. And I'm going, if you can get your own building, just take it. So it looks like some of the ones who are selling their practices who also own the building, they seem to be more desirable as a practice.
Yeah, so that's why I postulate that probably there is a correlation, that if you're buying a business, then you're potentially more likely to own the building eventually because you've got the owner selling both potentially.
I had a phone call with someone only yesterday, and they've had the practice here for 20-something years. Practice itself, it's basically it's a routine practice.
Yeah.
But they're making $300,000 a year profit in this practice, and they're going, I want to sell it. They go, I really want to sell it. But unfortunately, it's probably something I'm just going to close. Yeah, I'm thinking, here's that clinic that's making $300,000 a year profit.
Yeah.
for doing a normal week's work, and they've got some other podiatrists working there.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to close because the other podiatrists that are working there don't want to buy it. And I'm sitting there just going, you don't know.
All that effort that's taken to get to that successful practice,
Yeah.
that should be being bought by somebody. Go into debt, take a mortgage, whatever, take a loan in order to get it, and then build on that. You'll soon pay off the loan on that sort of figures. You'll soon pay it off, and the banks will lend you on the secure figures like that. And so then you're not losing those years trying to get to that stage. Because how many businesses get to 300,000 profit within the first 3 years? They don't.
Very rarely. One of mine did.
Yeah, yeah, but possibly not your first one. Possibly not your first one. Tyson.
Wasn't my first one. No, definitely was not. Oh my god! When I think of my first one, and I'm thinking, no wonder I was just eating soup most nights because that's about all I could afford. But the more mistakes you make, the more clinics I had, then it got better. But I look at this person who's making that much profit, and the people that are working there don't want to buy it. So the clinic will close. Those people will end up having to get another job somewhere else. All those patients will then get dispersed to other podiatry clinics. And then you know what will happen? 12 months later, someone will go, oh, that looks like a good spot to have a podiatry clinic. And they'll open it up and they'll spend the next 5 or 10 years building this thing up. And then they go, oh, I wish I could find another podiatrist, and they'll be looking for it. And the whole cycle will just restart.
It's like Groundhog Day. It's just over years rather than over days. Yeah, I just find it incredible. And I'm in the same boat. At some point, I'm going to want to be out of here. And I'd like somebody to take it over rather than actually me just closing the door on it. It seems daft to do that for how profitable and how well supported it is by the local community. It just doesn't make sense. And we were saying about the minimum 3 years wasted when we're talking about to get to that level. Yeah. The one thing you can't buy in life is time. Okay. You can't get more time. Yeah. Therefore, why give up 3 years of your life, not focusing on your personal life, actually not looking after yourself that well because you're eating pot noodles and sleeping on the floor at clinic because you can't afford a lot? Why not go, actually, my time is important to me. Every single year of my life is important to me, and I need to focus on me. And so in order to do that, I need to make sure I've already got a business that's doing well rather than I'm having to start it from scratch. It's a bit like when you buy your house, you don't build it yourself brick by brick. You either get somebody in to build it for you if you want us to do it from scratch, or you buy somebody else's house. But you don't do it brick by brick yourself.
I had someone approach me a while back and they said, I'm looking at buying this business. And so they get someone contact me, says, I want to sell. Have you got some tips on how I can sell? And if anybody wants to do this, if you go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, just follow all the prompts. There's an area there where you can have a free 30-minute chat with me. And this is what they normally do. So they'll say, I want to sell my practice. Have you got some tips? And I go, boop, this is what you do. Then I get other people who will contact me and go, thinking about buying a business. What should I be looking for? And I go, I should become a broker because I can just
marry them up. Yeah.
But I had one person present me say, this is the business that I'm looking at. I said, send me this stuff. I said, but this one you're going to have to pay for. So they did. They sent me this stuff. I looked through it all and I went, I reckon, looking at what you've given me here, how much they asked me for, they told me, I said, in 12 months, I can show you how you can add an extra 150 grand to their bottom line, almost right from as soon as you start, that they haven't seen the potential in this business yet.
Yeah,
and this is the part that after talking with you and driving at 400 miles an hour, over 700 kilometers we drove, 1,000 kilometers we drove. Scariest drive in my life. If anyone ever gets the opportunity to get in a car with Jonathan Small in his BMW i3, was it?
i8.
i8? Yeah, no, I recommend get a lift with somebody else because I was like driving with Miss Daisy and you're like a Formula One driver. And I believe when there's a road with grass down the middle of it, you shouldn't be doing 100 miles an hour.
What's it? You do exaggerate sometimes, Tyson.
Anyway,
you don't.
But after the many fearful chats we had in the car, it made me realize, because you could look at existing practice, even your practice, Jonathan. I know that if I looked at your practice, how good it is. But I'm thinking, oh, but if I come in with a slightly different mindset, or I tweak this and tweak that, you could add an extra 50, 100 grand to it.
Oh, easily.
Because you only work there part-time.
Yeah, that, and I haven't built it on custom orthotics.
Yeah.
So somebody who's really into their custom orthotics can come along and certainly add value to this business. I use a lot of off-the-shelf stuff. So yeah, absolutely. And that would apply to anybody's business. You can always see improvements, better ways of doing it. But it's good to have something that's already built, ready. Yeah. Not very good. We're not very creative. We're starting things off our own imagination. It's really difficult. And it's to do with the schooling system that makes us not really use our imagination these days. So starting a business from scratch and being imaginative about it is actually quite difficult, as opposed to taking an existing business and going, I can see where I could make changes that would work in that business. Because you've already got some foundations down effectively. So all you're doing is, like if you bought the house, you might redecorate or put different pictures up, or maybe you do a little bit of remodeling, build an extension or whatever. But if you sat down with somebody and said, okay, design your house from scratch and draw it up yourself and build it yourself, nobody could do that. They'd have to call in external help to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. It's a good analogy with the building, though, because some people can look at a building and just buy it, and they keep it exactly how it is, and they draw on the benefits of that, and it goes up in value over a period of time. Other people will see a building and go, oh, I can make these changes to this building, and within a very short period of time, I can bump the profit up to here and then benefit from those extra profits. And then down the track, when they go to sell it, they might sell it for more. So basically, are you saying your practice is for sale?
It's certainly, I'm looking for my exit. Yeah, I'm not closing the door yet, but I'm at an age and I know these things take time. So yes, I've got to explore this. And I'd really love some passionate podiatrist to come along and who wants to transform their life, who wants to have an easy 6-figure salary straight away from scratch, having serviced the debt on the place in order for them to buy it as well and still get a 6-figure salary, but wanting to continue what I've built, what I've spent 30 years building in this area. That would make absolute sense. I think.
But where is your practice anyway? I can never remember.
In Warwickshire, in England.
Warwickshire. So everyone would know where that is if you're in England.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that I'm very aware of is that we go into debt in order to buy our houses, to get on the housing ladder. We'll go into big debt, paying interest on that debt, and we don't bat an eyelid. It's the normal thing to do, so we just do it. If we don't do it, we'll never get on that housing ladder, and we'll never get to a point where we own our own property. Okay, the model is that we take on a substantial debt over 25 years to pay it off, and that gets us on the housing ladder. Why isn't that the norm for our businesses? Why isn't it the norm that you go into large debt to buy a business that creates an income that you eventually have paid off the debt and you own it all, and it's an asset to you in the same way your house is an asset to you? Okay, you can then build on that and it becomes even more profitable, even more value, and the next generation then buys it off you. And we keep going like that. And during that process, the business has got better systems, better communications, better resources, better equipment, better knowledge. So the patients are benefiting all the time. And it's not coming from that zero starting point. It just makes sense to me that we have to look at business as an investment, like we would look at buying a house as an investment to put a roof over our head. Buying a business is an investment to get an income for ourselves and have an asset that's worth something. When buying a house, it's an asset that's worth something. And we just seem to get stuck that shouldn't be done.
I know 6 podiatrists that I've spoken with over the last, say, maybe 2 years who have purchased somebody else's practice. Not one of them have regretted doing it. Every single one of them making really good money.
Yeah.
And when I bump into them, I jokingly say to them, so just out of curiosity, since buying the business, are you now driving a better car? And they went, oh, you have no idea. And then they tell me the car they've bought, because their life has changed. They've bought a practice that's making 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
That they never got working for somebody else, that they never would have taken them another 10 years to get to that level. But the other thing I want to say is the thinking is different in different countries. From American friends that I know, and if there's any Americans listening to this, they can shoot me down later if they want. But what I've observed is Americans, it's business first house second. So their thinking seems to be, you need to set up a well-established business first, or buy an existing business, get that up and running, rent while you build your business up. And then when you're making money, then you go and
buy the house. Yeah,
buy the house.
Sense. Yeah.
And because the house then, once again, if I'm wrong, please someone tell me, but their mortgage up to a certain amount is also tax deductible.
Oh, okay.
That's so if their business is going fine and they're making good money, then they buy in this house for up to a certain amount. Part of it's tax deductible. Balances itself out. I don't know if that contributes to their thinking being different, but I just know people over there, it seems to be business first, your house comes second. In Australia, it's, the great Australian dream, own your own house, get into debt, and then they try and do the business afterwards.
So it's really interesting, as I'm really keen at looking outside of podiatry, particularly UK podiatry, to models. So there's another model that makes sense and works. Yeah, in UK podiatry, they'll go, oh, that wouldn't be the way because that's not what we do in the UK. And so I'll say, well, look at the dentistry model. Dentists don't start their business from scratch generally. They generally buy into an existing practice, because dentist businesses sell for £500,000, £1 million,
Easily.
And so they're not going to have the money to be able to start just bite straight away. They'll have worked in it, become a partner, develop that sort of way, or because they've got a good cash flow, the banks will lend to them on that. So I think as we get these better practices developing in podiatry, and there's some amazing practices out there, and I never got a chance to show you some of the practices how podiatry used to be compared to where good practices are these days. But if you can buy a good practice that's all systemized, got a good marketing funnels, got a good cash flow, turning a good profit, so you don't have to sacrifice your personal time and your personal life in order to get this going, you're going to be in a better position. Just exactly the same as those people you talked about, those 6 people that have bought practices. They won't have sacrificed their personal life as much as somebody starting from scratch will have had to.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I do remember a couple of business people in Australia, and they always say, even when you're setting up your business, though, from the day you're setting your business up, you should be thinking about how you're going to sell it and when you're going to sell it, and structuring your business in a way that one day knowing somebody will want to buy it. And which is why it goes back to why you need to have systems in place. And you need to get business coaches. You need help getting it all set up right, knowing that one day you want to sell this thing and making it look attractive to people as well.
I completely agree with you. I didn't know this 10 years ago, Tyson. I really didn't. I was just that jobbing podiatrist in a private practice, just making the money from seeing patients, having an income from that, and thinking that maybe it might be worth something when I retired. It was only because I engaged with people like yourself and Tony that showed me that actually I need to have a much more systemized business so that actually it had some real value to it for people. And now it does. It's completely systemized. It means that I can live away from here and only have to do 3 days a week, and the systems take care of the place without me having to input to it other than do the clinical work that I do here, which could be replaced by me employing a podiatrist if I wanted to. And that makes a massive difference. And certainly we don't think when we're younger to think for that future.
No.
But I do know now, I wish I'd done this when I was in my 20s rather than when I'm in my 50s, because I'm losing so many years where I could have had much more success, and I've been successful. I could have had much more success earlier on and for longer in my life. And I think that's a massive part of us when we're looking at our business. This is an asset for you to keep for as long as you want it. It isn't necessarily be for life. It could just be for a period of time, and then you sell it on and you do something else. Or if it is for life, then you want to make sure it's part of your pension fund when you come to retire, that actually it's got some value, because that would be a real boost to your pension fund.
Yeah, that was someone I spoke to recently as well, and they said they never really put money into super because they always thought, I'm going to build my practice up one day, I'm going to sell it for this mozza, and that's going to be my retirement.
Yeah.
And they're starting to realize now that nobody wants to buy it because everyone just wants to set up another practice around them. They're screaming out to sell the business.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, before we wrap up, if anyone wants to get hold of you, if they want to talk to you more about this particular subject, or, and I don't like the term if someone wants to pick your brain, I don't believe in picking people's brains. It's just so.
It seems very Hannibal Lecterish, doesn't it?
But if somebody wants to reach out, say somebody might be interested in actually buying your practice.
Yeah.
What's the best way of getting hold of you?
The best way is probably just to go onto my clinic website and contact me through there. That's the easy way. Health First Foot and Gait Clinic in Southam. You could email me, either my clinic with emails health1first@aol.com or my personal one's footmanj@aol.com. Those are probably the easiest ways.
So what was the first one? Slow down.
Sorry. Health
All our friends in the Netherlands are
sorry.
going, what's he talking about?
Health First Foot and Gait Clinic in Southam. Okay?
Yes.
The email address for that is health and then the number 1 first@aol.com. Or my personal one is footmanj@aol.com.
Okay, Jonathan, I want to thank you for coming on and us getting to talk more about this particular subject. I had a few people come up to me at the Foot and Ankle Show and since then who said they loved your talk. And I told them we were going to be doing this episode because I didn't think you covered it enough in your talk. And they went,
well, thank you.
And they said, yeah, but no, they said, no, we got the point that he was making, but it was a little bit rushed towards the end. So they were looking forward to this episode coming out. So thank you very much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom in this area.
Thank you for having me again. It's been great talking, Tyson.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jonathan Small today. And there's 3 takeaway points that I want to highlight that I think are really important. The first one is buying an established practice does give you immediate cash flow, which is really important compared to when you're starting from scratch. You need to know that you've got a cash reserve because sometimes it can take longer than expected to build your business. The second thing is if you're buying a good business, it will have systems in place for patient management, for billing, and other operations that actually make the business run better. There's a little side note to that too. If you can look at a business that's got great systems and you look at the patient base and you think you can make it even better, then it is a massive opportunity. And the third thing that I think is really important is with a profitable business, when you buy it, you have a better chance of actually securing a loan if you wanted to maybe buy the building as well. And long term, that is just an amazing asset to have behind you. Like I mentioned during our conversation, I bought my building, and even when I've sold my practice, which was 9 years ago, I've still been collecting rent from that for the past 9 years. So owning your own building is a fantastic investment. That's it for me this week. I want you to look after yourself, look after your family, and I will have another episode for you next week. Bye for now. Okay, if you're still here, here is this week's little Easter egg. And it is a quote from Winston Churchill. And it says, "You will never reach your destination if you throw rocks at every dog that barks." Now, if you think about that, what he's talking about is if there's a particular thing you want to do, you've got a goal, you must stay focused. You must have clarity on what it is that you want to achieve. You can't be distracted. Every time you get distracted and you stop getting on that path of what it is you're trying to achieve, it's going to take so much longer to get there. It'll take so much longer to get to your destination. And that's what he's talking about. You'll never reach your destination if you throw rocks at every dog that barks. So just think about that. If you're on a long trip somewhere, walking, and every time a dog barks, you stopped to throw a rock at that dog, which I don't think you should do. I don't recommend that. It's not fair on the dog. But you know how long it would take you to get to where you're going. Just think of that in terms of your business, your career, whatever goals it is that you actually have, stay focused on it. Don't get distracted. There's going to be barking dogs absolutely everywhere. You need to just put some blinkers on and just keep moving forward. Well, I hope you got something from that. And by the way, if you're enjoying these little Easter eggs, little secret message I put at the end of the podcast, please send me an email, tyson@podiatrylegends.com or tf@tysonfranklin.com. And in the subject line, just say, "loving the Easter eggs." And that way I'll know that I should keep doing these. Okay, talk to you next week. Bye.